Singer Sue Ray, Neurodivergence in the Creative World. Hello everyone, welcome to Signpost for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter, and we have got Sue Ray here. Hello, we're finally here, it's so cool.
Yes, very excited, thanks for having me.
I know, and we were having so much conversation beforehand, I was like, quick, we better start recording.
We've done a whole podcast before the podcast.
We have. Oh my gosh. Neurodivergence in the creative world. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, you're a singer. Mm-hmm. Can you give me a bit of background with regard to your world of singing, how you came to it, what you've brought to the world, what you're into, so that the world can kind of like place you? Is that okay?
Sure.
I've listened to your music and fallen in love, and you've converted me to country music. But we've just talked about how there's different types of country music, and hey, I'm open to all of that.
I've heard that so many times. I don't like country music, but I like what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I've thought about that, and sometimes I think it's not about genre. I think it's about intent and heart. I think if you love what you're doing and that translates through your music, no matter what genre, people feel that.
Everyone jump on Spotify, listen to Sue Ray and listen to Red Roses. That's the one I jumped on. Yeah. And I just kept playing it over and over. And I haven't told you this. I've been stalking you.
That's okay.
And you've been getting credits from Spotify, which is great.
I really appreciate that. that 0.07 cents is going to make a huge difference. Yes, I appreciate that.
Yes, do it, people. And no, seriously, there's soul. There's soul and there's depth and there's just, my heart just it floats and sings at the same time. Yeah,
I think because essentially, going back to your original question of where I come from, I think with the neurodivergence, I always saw the world a bit differently. I communicated differently because I struggled with communication. I never could speak about emotion. Like I guess because...
What was emotion like for you to try to... And when we talk about neurodivergence, let's clarify, we're talking about ASD.
ASD2 and ADHD, combination ADHD.
Yeah, great.
So that's my formal diagnoses over the years. But as a child in the 80s, as a girl particularly, I didn't, no one looked at me as having anything because only naughty little boys had ADD, which was all they sort of talked about back then, definitely not Asperger's, which is what it was. Now it's called ASD2, but... as a child, I did struggle with just telling people how I felt because when I spoke, I guess I'm quite literal and I just am very observational and I would point out things that I observed. But as you get older, you start to learn, well, humans sometimes don't like to hear what is obvious. They like subterfuge and there's like manners, the very English British thing of don't say what you're feeling or don't say what you mean, but just what should be said kind of thing.
Socially appropriate. And
I didn't get that. So I guess I held in a lot because I would, you'd see people's reactions and I just became so hypervigilant at observing people. I think I became hypervigilant at microfacial expressions because I started to see people how they were all talking in a group, but then when I would enter the situation and start talking, I'd instantly notice people's facial expressions change or the way they observed me as being different. So at a very young age, I always knew I was other. I didn't know why, I didn't know what was wrong, but essentially without the emotional capacity to really analyse it, I just thought, well, I'm just wrong. There's something wrong with me.
That must have been devastating for your sense of self and your confidence.
But at the same time, I guess I didn't know any different.
Yep.
So I just thought, there's something wrong with me, so I'll modify my behaviour. So from a young age, I learnt to mirror. I think now that I know more about it, because I didn't know back then, the more I'm learning now due to my son's diagnosis. God, even in the last 5 years, I've learnt more than I knew up until that point. I was obviously mirroring, so I would somehow, not consciously, but I'd probably pick out people at the time that appeared successful, making friends or being socially accepted, and I would sort of mirror that behaviour.
I'll do what they're doing.
Yeah, and from a young age, I guess because I could remember jokes or I could remember one-liners or I could remember the funny things I'd see in movies, I'd repeat them and then people would laugh. So I think from a young age, the persona of the funny girl, like I heard... what's that actress, Rebel Wilson, talking about that. I was the chubby kid, awkward, but I made people laugh, so then I became that persona of the funny fat girl. And that unfortunately became an aspect of my personality that I had to then consistently live up to as I moved through the world. But then I'd always loved music. I was very fortunate. I was born into a musical family. My dad was in a band. He owned a musical instrument store. We never went to cricket matches or footy on the weekends. We went to gigs, or Dad would run outdoor festivals. And
that was normal to you?
Every Wednesday night he used to chair the country music club in my hometown, Toowoomba, and so every Wednesday we went to the country music club, and as a kid I'd be sitting there doing my homework, listening to these musos get up and sing, and it was just normal life for me. So I didn't know any different. So I guess I'm fortunate that from a young age I could see that being in the creative industry was valuable, or it made him a living. He fed his family, he paid the bills. So school was never really promoted by him because he had struggled at school. So I've tried to bring it up with my dad that I definitely think he's on the spectrum, but he's at that age now. He's nearly 80. He's like, can't teach an old dog new tricks. But he definitely was very highly creative, very inventive, struggled at school because, I think he got 1% on a test for spelling his name right, is the joke in the house. Aww. But he left school, but then he discovered wrestling and he got into that, and then he, found his thing, and then he learnt guitar when he was 16, and then from a young age he was able to start making a living in a band, paying the bills. So he got out of school and suddenly became the good-looking cool guy, which everyone then loved because music brought him that. So I guess he brought the music into the household, and my mum just loved music. She was not musical by any means, but she was a huge music fan. So there was always Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, Willie Nelson, Merle Haggard, Tammy Wynette, like all that country music always playing around me. So
which is your education? Yeah,
my music education just happened in the home. So I was very fortunate. And then because my mum just loved music, when I was about 8 or 9, she put me in for singing lessons with this lady called Michelle Snyder, who's a family friend, and she had originally in the 70s learnt guitar from my dad as a guitar student, and then her career went on to become music teacher and she ended up becoming my singing teacher. And then she started a kids singing group called Kids Biz, which was sort of like, there was 2 girls, 2 boys, and she would send us out to school fetes to sing or to markets, and we were singing. So from the age of 10 or 11, I was earning money from music.
Really?
So I guess, it set that tone for,
this is real.
Yes, but at the time I can still remember having the battle in my mind of, Dad plays guitar, but why does he need that? I'm singing to these amazing backing tracks. They're amazing, and singing to other people's music. But then when I was about 14, I was introduced to Tori Amos. And this was the 90s, people remember. This was a long time ago.
I remember Tori Amos, yeah.
And she was such an incredible lyricist, and her music and her stories and the way they just gripped me. And her album Little Earthquakes just became like this, just revelation for me. And she played the piano, so I thought, wow,
so
she plays...
You might have been hyperfixating on it.
I hyperfixated, absolutely, to the point where I can turn it on now 30 years later and still know the words. And
really?
So I would hyperfixate that. And, and I realised she played her own instrument, so then I thought, well, I tried piano, but again, the piano teacher... He told my mum after a year that she was wasting her money because I couldn't read music. I realise now I've got an element of dyslexia there. So I've always struggled with spelling, struggled with reading music. You could ram it down my throat and I just couldn't grasp it. But I was playing by ear. Mm-hmm. So he would play the piece and I would listen to him, and then I would go home and figure it out based on what I'd seen him play. And it took him a year to figure out that I wasn't reading the music.
Really? That's incredible, actually, that retention. Really,
And so he told my mum, you're wasting your money. She can keep coming, but honestly, she's not learning how to read. She's just playing by ear, which I'm grateful for. But I learned the piano, and then I wasn't as good as Tori Amos, so my brain always thinks, if I can't be as good as that, then don't bother. And my brain will just go, no more. If you can't be that good, you're never going to pick something else. So then I picked guitar, and for some reason it stuck with me and I grasped it quickly. I learnt 3 chords, and within a week of learning 3 chords, I wrote my first song.
Really?
Just fell out.
Really?
And that's when I went into my dad and I said, Dad, I've written this song. And the look on his face was like, what do you mean? Because I was only 14 or 15.
Yeah.
And he couldn't believe it because he had never written a song. He'd always been in cover bands playing other people's music.
I'm just in shock there. Your father, with all of his musicality, had never... We were just talking that I've written a song.
Yeah. He had never thought to, because in his world, what paid his bills was playing other people's music, and he was successful at that. And I guess he just had never thought to. So in a way...
You don't decide to write a song. The song comes to you.
They come to you. But what's funny is, in me starting to write songs...
Yeah.
I think years later, it gave him permission to do the same. And I remember the day he came to me, Susie, I've written this song.
Oh, wow.
So now he writes.
Really?
So I think once he did it for the first time, then he got that calling, but he just had never given himself permission to. But when I wrote that first song, then the next song came and the next, and I only knew 3 chords. So that's when I realised it wasn't the instrument, it was just the guitar became a tool by which to set the tone. Whatever chord I played, whether it be major, minor, would inspire a feeling that would just draw the songs out of me, like they were just. And I thought, I look back now and think, how can a 15-year-old have been singing about?
Tell me, could you express yourself more through the lyrics than you could?
Yes,
in talking to it.
This is my really long way of coming back to that original point. That
I'm with you.
I couldn't communicate, I guess, well in person. Like I felt it very uncomfortable telling someone that I liked them or that they were my friend or that I, was uncomfortable or I didn't like their behaviour. I just would stand there and go, whatever. And I would accept whatever behaviour people treated me with because I thought I deserved it because I knew I was weird. But I couldn't tell people if I was their friend or if someone did something good. I didn't know how to compliment them because even saying to someone that was good felt awkward because I never heard that consistently because no one would ever give me that validation, because I think my parents potentially are both on the spectrum and it's uncomfortable for them and I just didn't grow up with constant validation. So I think the only way... You didn't know
that language,
I just didn't have that language and I still to this day struggle with that. Even if my partner says, I love you, I go, yeah, you too.
What about with your kids?
My kids, I tell them 100 times a day because I don't want them to be like me.
You've got that figured out. You're like, we are getting that right.
So
you could express yourself through music.
Yeah, and that was okay because then I could say, oh, this isn't about me, it's just a character. Or I could push that emotion onto the protagonist in the song.
There's a lot of people with ASD who really enjoy acting because they can play a role and it gives them this distance to portray these different emotions, but they don't feel personally vulnerable. Yeah. But in their personal lives, they actually really struggle with that expression of that emotionality. I wonder if there's a similarity there.
I actually studied acting for 3 years.
Of course you did.
I did. And the style was Lecoq's style of acting, which was masks.
Really?
There's you got the actors like your Tobey Maguires and all those guys that are method actors. They become the character that they're playing during the filming of that film. Whereas Lecoq's believed you didn't have to become the character. You could put on what he called masks, which represented different physical traits. So you would take on the physical traits of what the character would be. Like if your character was supposed to have a limp, then you would have a limp, and that would then bring on the persona of the character. And I realised I was attracted to that because it allowed me. I learned about all the different masks.
It's more masking.
So I struggled a bit. I obviously got through school, but by the skin of my teeth, which was really, even music, I failed at school because I couldn't read music and they didn't care about what a great singer I was or how I could work a crowd or any of those things that have continued to make me money to this day. All the choir teacher cared about was could I read the music on the sheet I was given. So it's so funny that I failed all of that, but then came out of school and was so fascinated. I didn't think I'd be a performer. I wanted to be on the mixing desk because I'd seen my dad do sound with all the buttons. I loved buttons. I could get in an elevator and want to push every button, or I'd see the mixing desk and I wanted to play with the sliders and the knobs and the lights and that was so fascinating to me. So I came straight out of school and went in to study sound engineering at the School of Audio Engineering. But then once we got in there, that's when my dyslexia started to play a part because then they would give us these, I could do the sound based on what I felt and heard. I could create a great mix, but then they'd be like, well, what frequency is that? And I would get the frequencies mixed up. Or they would say, oh, you've got to follow the chain path, and I'd just get so confused by the written aspect of it. And back then, again, there was no allowances for neurodivergence because I didn't even know I was, and this was in the 90s.
Or that you were dyslexic.
So I struggled with that side of it, so then that made me lose the confidence to get out and just do sound, whereas now I do sound all the time and I know what sounds good. I don't care if it's 1K or 2K I'm turning up. People say to me, I just say, is it treble, mid or bass, and then where does it sound, where does it feel for you? And that's how I do sound, and that's how I still produce and mix my own songs, by feel. And people will always say, gee, that song made me feel good, or it sounds so good, and I'm like, well, I don't know what frequencies I used or what filters, it just sounded good. Or when it didn't sound good, I stopped and went back.
So you're a natural?
I guess that's maybe my superpower, but I really struggled. So I did the sound but failed in all the written stuff. So again, came out lacking confidence. And then I thought, well, maybe I thought I'd get into playing. So I did a performance course where I met another band, and it was all about performing, and that's where I got Student of the Year.
Wow.
I didn't even expect it. Just went to the graduation night and they said, and Student of the Year is Sue Ray. And I went, what? And but because that was, without me realising, is where I shone, because I'd been the funny fat girl all my life. So I had the one-liner jokes. I could work a crowd. I didn't get upset if people heckled me because I was already so used to being picked on.
Do you get nervous in front of crowds?
No, not at all now. I get post-performance anxiety, which my mum observed early on. She's like, I could get out there and do the show, but then afterwards I think my own judgment would kick in, and I'd start analysing all the mistakes I made or how I could have done that better, which is also, my dad's a real perfectionist. So I'd get off stage and he'd be like, you could have sung that better, or you could have used this microphone, it would have sounded better, or you should have used this guitar. So that his voice became my inner critic. But
I hope you've worked that one through.
Oh
that's
yeah,
just cruel.
With age you do. Like, it takes a long time to realise that, that's his own insecurities. But yeah, so I don't get nervous, and I realised then I was just a natural on stage. I could work a crowd. I had all the jokes. I had the one-liners. I knew, I guess, watching, I could tell if someone in the audience was getting bored by their body language, and I'd focus on them. And I have a way of working a crowd that to this day people always say, God, I wish I was like that. But then I got into bands, and like me, I never had aspirations of more, because I didn't think it was possible for me as this awkward, weird person. I didn't think it was possible to aim higher.
Yeah.
So I'd get comfortable. So for years I got into bands, and I just did the circuit. I played in my town where I was living in Brisbane, Queensland, and it had a great music scene in the 90s. So I cut my teeth there, playing in bands, playing at all the venues, had a great time, and never thought anything outside of that. I didn't think of releasing my own music. All the little silly songs I'd written were just in the back of my head. Back then I had an old dictaphone tape player, which I would record cassettes and cassettes of songs I recorded, which, God, there's probably hundreds on there. But, and then my early 20s, I think I got it, I did what everyone has to do. I got a real job, in inverted commas, got a job in a call centre, and eventually worked my way up.
Your soul.
Very quickly got good at that, because it was scripts, and because I had the memory for songs and things. I could just learn the scripts and repeat them 100 times a day, and suddenly got very quick and very good at selling. And then I did that for 4 years, and then moved into another department where I was a data analyst, because I was good with patterns, not numbers, just patterns. So I could look at the patterns and see the irregularities and very quickly figure these out. This was meter readings, by the way, for electricity. Very boring.
So that's ASD, right?
Yeah, that's the ASD fascination. Yep. I think I got very good at that. But then it also meant that I came up against difficulty with my interpersonal relationships in the workplace, because of my natural ability to figure that stuff out quickly and do well. It would sort of somehow threaten the other people who'd been there for years, thinking I was there to steal their job, or
made them not look good because you were fast and efficient. Yeah,
I was fast and efficient, and then they would bully me by exclusion. Which,
can you jump forward? You told me the story about the trains.
Yeah.
Can you tell me that story
about working for yes?
Yeah. Tell me that one.
Well, I ended up leaving that job because it got to the point where I was very depressed, and ended up having to take about 6 months off. And then someone actually said, I think I was 29 at the time. I just had my diagnosis of Asperger's, funnily enough.
And discovered it's not just Rain Man?
Yeah, when I had the difficulties of that job, I started to get a counsellor, and that's where I went, okay. And then that psychiatrist diagnosed me with Asperger's, which is now called ASD. So then I didn't believe her. I actually thought, no, you're full of crap. This is not... Yeah. But anyway, a friend said, you should go to England and do the work visa over there, because I was at that point, I had been doing the circle for 10 years in Brisbane, playing the same venues, and I'd hit the ceiling. I was like, okay, I'm bored now.
Yeah.
The dopamine had run out, I think, and there was no new experiences, and I was hungry for something different. And my friend said she'd just come back from England. Oh, you should apply for the work visa before you get too old. And just on a whim, I did the application, and it was like a week before my 30th birthday or something, and it came through.
Wow. And
I was still at that job, the electricity company, and I just went in and said, I'm giving my notice. And he just said, there's a lineup for your job. You won't get it back if you quit. And I just said, I don't care. After 8 years of that level of security, I just threw caution to the wind.
See you later.
Got on an aeroplane. I sold everything, and I moved to England for what I thought would be 2 years. And I thought, well, with my acting diploma up my sleeve, maybe I could get on to West End and do theatre.
Yeah.
So I thought, yay, I'm going to go over there for 2 years. And I had one job when I first got there, just in a call centre because, that was easy. But then through a job agency, they got me a job at South West Trains, working on the trains, just as a project officer. Me, with my inability to read, I didn't read my contract properly. I just signed it and went, yeah, okay, it's a job. I'll learn when I get there. And so the first day they gave me a task of, we've just had this is South West Trains, we've just recently painted all of our train stations, the South West colours. We just need you to go to each station and take photos and create a report so we can submit it to the government to show we've done the work we got the funding for. So my brain went, okay, I've just got to go to all the stations.
I see the task.
So I see the task. They gave me the timetable for the trains, and sometimes I'd have to catch a train to a station, but I'd have to wait there for an hour and a half because it's a little country station before I could catch the next train going in the same direction. But then I realised that if I stopped off at that train, 2.5 minutes later, a train going in the opposite direction would be coming. So I would get off the train very quickly, go click, 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 take the 4 photos I needed to take. Then I'd run over the bridge, jump on the train going the other way, and I zigzagged the train stations.
So you've got your ADHD kicking in, your ASD kicking in, you're a machine.
And even then I thought this was the easy. I was texting friends going, this is the easiest job I've ever had. This is so cool. And 2 weeks in, I did my report. I walked over and I put it on the team leader's table. And she goes, what's this? And I said, that's the report for all the stations. And she went, oh, okay, thanks. And I thought, oh no, I've done something wrong. I knew it was too easy. I've missed something. There's obviously something. And I went back to my desk and I'm beating myself up thinking, I'm going to get fired. Oh God. And then the head, the director, Malcolm, came over. Lovely man, and he pulled a chair out next to me and sat down next to me, and she pulled a chair out and she sat on the other side of me, and I thought, I've done something really wrong. I'm in so much trouble. And I said, is everything okay? And he went, yeah, it's actually yes, it is, but we would just like to know how you were able to go to all of the stations in 2 weeks, because the other guy behind you, he's had a similar project with the car parks. He was supposed to do the same thing. It's been 6 months and he hasn't finished yet. And I told them, and they just went, right. And that's where they realised the other guy was taking the mickey. And and then the other guy then said to me, can you help me do my photos? He had to take photos of the car parks, and he was supposed to have the before and afters, but the before was back in summer and it was now winter. And he was supposed to he couldn't take photos of the car parks because there was now snow on them. And when I wrote back to him, I said, mate, there's snow on them now. He had a total panic attack and I don't know what happened to him. But that's just an example of how...
But you didn't stay in the UK.
No, but Malcolm actually said, well, we gave you a 3-month contract to do that and you've done it in 2 weeks, but we're going to keep you anyway. And then he told me when I left, I'm actually telling the job agency I only want Australians now. But sometimes it works in my favour. No,
Australians with ASD and ADHD, please specify.
But yeah, so it has worked in my favour in some instances.
Yeah.
But
that's
then
it. You've got these superpowers, right? But you also have these areas of vulnerability, and it's finding the world that matches you rather than you trying to match it.
Yeah. Well, when the psychiatrist first diagnosed me with Asperger's, she was like, "You're 99% Asperger's, but the 1% that isn't really isn't, and you're really throwing me." And I've never forgotten that. But obviously, at the time, I was 27, 28. I had obviously, in my own way, figured out rituals and routines that worked for me to help me function and help me stay out of overwhelm. So I only worked 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So I had every Wednesday off. So there was a break in the middle. I played gigs on the weekend, which were my dopamine, like going to gigs, performing. I had band practice every Tuesday night. Like there was always just music in my life. Because I was single, I would go out and go watch bands nearly every night of the week. There was a venue that my friend owned that was really laid back, so I could go any night of the week and just watch a band, get a feed, go home. So I was hardly ever home. I was never by myself. I realised now at the time I needed that constant stimulation, which is clearly ADHD.
Yes.
But that was missed. But then I obviously went and lived in England. But then when I was there, I applied for a recording grant back home in Australia. And I didn't think I'd get it. I'd applied for grants before and never gotten one. And if you don't know what a recording grant is, it's just a grant that is like an arts organisation will give you money to make a recording or do a project.
Great. Yeah.
And it was a big grant. It was $20,000, and this was, 15 years ago. And I'd just moved to England. I'd been there about 5 months, and then I got the phone call, "Oh, congratulations, you got the grant." And I was like, "Great, can I make the album in England?" And they said, "No, you have to come back and spend the money in Australia." So my plans to stay in England for 2 years got thwarted because I had to come back and make the album and have it finished within about 7 months. So I only really stayed in England for a year, which meant I just ended up just playing gigs and enjoying myself in England. And I got to play all the venues I wanted to play, like the Troubadour and Ronnie Scott's and the Full Moon and Putney. And so that was really fun. I played those venues and I have those stories. I made some great friends. And then I came back.
And how did you find bands to play with?
Well, the funny thing is there's an organisation called APRA, which we've talked about, which is the Australian Performing Rights Association.
Yes.
So they're the organisation that collect your royalties on your behalf. But if you're a member, they do things like member meetups in different countries. So they had an APRA members meetup in London. So I went to that when I first got there and met a bunch of other Australians living in England, which was really great. But there happened to be a British booking agent that went, and he met me. And funnily enough, his name was Alex Lloyd, which there's an Australian singer called Alex Lloyd.
Yeah.
I didn't recall meeting him, but about 3 days later I got an email, "Hey Sue Ray, it's Alex Lloyd. I met you at the APRA night." And I thought, did I meet Alex Lloyd? like, "You were amazing." That guy. And so I was like, wow. And he said, I'd love to help you get some gigs. And I thought, wow, this dude wants to help me get gigs. So we met up for a cuppa, and I turned up at the cafe. I was like, that's not Alex Lloyd.
How sad to be always a perpetual disappointment.
What's funny is I actually opened for the real Alex Lloyd a couple of months ago at a gig in my hometown. And I told him that story. And he goes, "Yeah, I used to live in England. I know that guy." He said, "Yeah, that's the other Alex Lloyd," which was so funny. But yeah, I met him and he got me some great gigs and he was really lovely and I had a great time. And I played the Troubadour, which was to me an iconic venue. And so I did that and then came back and made the album, and then my life pivoted. Up until that point, I thought maybe theatre was where I wanted to be because I'm a big personality, I'm loud, and I thought theatre suited me other than film, because film you have to be quite small in your body because the slightest movement looks huge on a big screen. So for me, I always struggled with that underacting, but theatre was just, it's like I was born for it. But then I made the album and then suddenly...
Musicals.
It started,
you did musicals.
Yeah, I did musicals. And,
oh, yes.
Yeah, so I thought I was born for the stage, but then... Once I actually started doing more theatre work, then I realised this is boring, saying the same thing over and over again every night. Like, there's no spontaneity in it. So that, I think, again, that fixation on something and then the loss of interest. And with my brain, once I lose interest in something, I'm done.
No,
I will never...
The book is closed.
Yeah, I'll never date that thought again. It's like once the romance is over, it is over for me. So theatre was done. And
so
then
you need a lot of stimulation.
Yeah, and then with the album, I got a publicist and I was able to get some festival gigs, and then I played Woodford Folk Festival, which I got a real, just a bug in my, I just loved it, the performance bug, playing festivals, and then I started doing loads of gigs in Brisbane and really got into that. But then, because I'd already done Brisbane, I then got the hunger for something more, and then that's when a friend who had heard about the American Green Card Lottery said to me, "You should apply for the American Green Card."
Of course,
and I thought,
should.
Well, I'd love to go to Nashville. I've never been there.
What's the probability of winning that?
Well, again, I don't know if it's God or Mana or, Buddha, I don't know, whatever you believe in. I definitely believe in something greater than myself or my ancestors or something, but there was something at play.
And can I just say, ancestors, you're Indigenous?
Yes.
So let's throw that in the mix.
Yeah, I'm a proud Gamilaroi woman.
Yes.
So I have a connection. I actually also have Native American.
Do you?
I know it's pretty strange, but a lot of Native Americans came over to Australia in the gold rush.
Did not know that.
As, obviously, as servants to the Americans that came over for the gold rush. And then,
of course. Yeah,
and so while the great-great-great-great-great-granddad married an Aboriginal woman, and she's my matriarchal line. So she had a daughter who had a daughter who had a daughter who had my mum. So
wow, so you've got Native American and you've got Indigenous Australian.
Yeah, as well. And then, but then their daughter married an Aboriginal man, so then there's more Aboriginal. But yeah, so I have really strong connection to country, to animals, to nature, a deep calling to be on, like I hate wearing shoes. I like to put my feet in the dirt. But when my friend said you should apply for the green card, the funny thing was about a week before my friend who had just come back from Nashville took me out for a coffee, and he said, Sue, your music would do so well in Nashville. And I'm like, oh no, I don't think I'm commercial enough. He's like, no, you got to go to Nashville. As I was leaving that cafe, I got a phone call from my booking agent. Sue Ray, there's this grant going called through Sounds Australia to go to Nashville to do a songwriting grant, to do a songwriting thing. And I was like,
do you ever feel like the universe is slapping you?
Oh, beat this. Then I got home and checked my emails, and there was an email from Sounds Australia. Hey, Sue Ray, we think you should apply for this grant. So that was
Trifecta.
3. Everything comes in 3s. In a matter of 2 days, I had 3 different people say I should apply.
A clue.
So I applied thinking, this is in the bag. I've got this. Then I didn't get it. A couple of months later, sorry, you didn't get the grant. But we really liked your application, and if you paid for your own flights, we'll still put you on all of the same showcases. So I'd just come back from England, so I had no money. I was like, money was tight, and I thought, oh, how am I going to make this happen? I just walked away from the computer and said, this isn't going to happen. And then again, come in 3s. A few days later, my syncing agent called me, and that's a syncing is someone who gets your music onto TV and like movies and things. And she rang me, and the funny thing was when I gave her my album Red Roses, she said, oh, TV shows don't really like country music. No offence, but I'll give it a try. I'll pitch your songs, but I really don't have confidence. Well, she rang me and she said, Sue, I've got to eat my words. Not only did this TV show on SBS pick your music, they picked 3 of your songs off Red Roses, and they're going to play them on this particular TV series called Time of Our Lives, which had Claudia Caravan in it.
No.
And one of your songs, Wish I Was, is going to be played during the outro of the very last episode. So you make more money for how long the songs get played. So the first 2 were played 5-10 seconds each in the background of a scene, but this 3rd song was played through the whole credits.
How great.
At peak time. So I think, I suddenly got about $5,000 or $6,000 for that. And then I got a phone call from my booking agent like a few days later. Sue, I got you doing 3 shows opening for this band Mental as Anything, who you may have heard of.
Yeah, Mental as Anything, absolutely.
On tour with
iconic.
them. And I was just like, how much am I getting for that? And it was like, good money per show. So within a matter of a month, I went from having no money to about $8,000 or $9,000. And I just wrote back to Sounds Australia, yeah, I'll come. And so I just booked a flight, booked the accommodation at an Airbnb in Nashville, and a few months later I was gone. But while I was on the shows with Mental as Anything, I got an email saying I'd been shortlisted for the green card, which is a year after I'd applied, so I'd forgotten about it. So then I thought, wow. So then I had to go to Sydney and go to the consulate, and they approved my green card. And yeah, so my story is I do believe in luck. So I think I used to get really in the thick of my depression. It wasn't depression. Now that I'm older and I have perspective, I realise it was just physical and mental overwhelm from masking all the time. Exhaustion, because that character that I had to put on, that mask as I left the house every day of the funny fat girl, it was exhausting being funny all the time, because I had to constantly observe everyone around me and be like, oh, yeah, what do they find funny? Or they're looking a bit... So then I also felt then that anyone remotely sad, I had to entertain. I had to be entertaining all the time. And it was great because people would always say to me, oh, you're so funny, or I love being around you, or they'd invite me to their parties because I was always going to bring light and laughter. Yeah. But then I'd get home and
shattered,
cry, rock in the shower in the dark. Oh, like the water is like my thing. I used to sit in the bottom of the shower and just till the water would run cold. And then I'd be like, oh, where am I? So I realised that it wasn't sustainable. And the beauty of moving to another country where absolutely nobody knows you, you can absolutely reinvent yourself. So suddenly I went from being Sue Ray, Owen's daughter, the funny girl from that band, or you used to date that guy, or you used to be this, to Sue Ray, musician.
There you go.
And there's something about Americans that live in the South. They're just really, they don't come from that same sort of background that we do here in like colonised countries, is that real tall poppy thing that we have in Australia. They don't really have that. They're more pioneers. If you work hard, no matter who you are, you can be something. And if they see you working hard, or if they see you're talented, they want to be around that. So I found very quickly I built a really big group of friends and acquaintances, and people were inviting me into their...
There's a real celebration. Where are you at? What are you doing?
Yeah, they'd be like, oh, you're awesome. You should come to our house for a songwriting session. And I'd be like, yeah, okay. Then I'd get an invite. And I'd think, oh, they're actually following through. And people who I thought were very good, very revered writers were inviting me into their inner circles. And I got a job very quickly, and and that's where I met my partner, father of my babies. So I was meant to go because I met the father of my babies, but I also got a job with my experience working in the local music shop, which happened to be one of the best music shops in Nashville, like selling vintage guitars where all the big stars would come in. So here I am working on the front desk, and there's Chris Stapleton and Chris Isaac and Zach Brown and, you know, everybody coming into that shop. So
did you play it cool and pretend you're like,
I think it's why she gave me the job. Again, with my facial recognition stuff, sometimes I'm really good at faces, but then my brain confuses why I know someone. So I think I kind of know them, but I didn't know who they were. And I think she loved that because this place was a sanctuary for the famous. So they could come in and hide, and they could just come in and chill out and look at guitars and relax without people hounding them for signatures. So, you know, I hung out with Zach Brown for half an hour. I had no idea. And I think at one point he looked at me funny, and I thought, he's looking at me funny. Am I supposed to know him? And then when he left, my boss was like, did you see Zach Brown? I went, no. And she went, you were just talking to him. My partner's a big fan, so I had to text him, I just met Zach Brown. But I didn't know it was him. And so I ran out the front, and here he is getting on his motorbike signing autographs because girls had stopped him in the street. And I thought, how funny. But that was probably...
What happened when you ran out?
Nothing. I just turned around and went back in. I was so embarrassed. But that's probably the quirks of my personality, is that sometimes... Like, I can tell you every movie Molly Ringwald was in the 80s, but I can't recognise someone I work with if that's out of context. Yeah. Like, girls I work with at where I work now, if I see them outside of my workplace, I have to think, where do I know them from?
And, you know, I think it's really about embracing yourself and saying, this is me, and not apologising for it, and then accommodating or having a sense of humour.
Yeah, and that's because I forget names. Like, it takes me a really long time to get familiar with someone's name.
Yeah.
But that's what I love. In Australia, we can say, hey, mate, or hey, honey. And in the South, it's like, hey, y'all. You know, and I love that. But
names are overrated.
I felt that because I couldn't reinvent myself, I would hold back from being the funny girl, and I would just try to be more reserved. And they liked me for it, and I realised I was able to make friends and not have to perform all the time. And I felt very accepted there. And it was rejuvenating because it allowed me to get to know myself for the first time outside of that persona of Sue Ray in the inverted commas. I was actually just Sue Ray, singer-songwriter from Australia.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like I could just be, well, I didn't quite know who me was, but it allowed me the freedom to just explore without really knowing I was exploring.
The ability to breathe out.
Yeah.
You know, just breathe out and say, this is me.
Yep.
And to give yourself permission and not try to perform for anybody.
And I was just good I was just good. They were like, gee, you're a great singer.
Can I tell you, I have this fantasy. I have this fantasy that the world wakes up to people who have ASD and they say, we embrace you, you be you. Mm-hmm. And we do not expect you to mask. We do not expect you to be socially appropriate or to figure it out or to do all the social cues that are appropriate. You do you. And it would just be so extraordinary. You would have all of these amazing characters coming forward with wherever they're at, and it would just be a very honest conversation, and I would just celebrate that.
It would be lovely.
I mean, I can't actually imagine it, but I would love it theoretically. Yeah,
I love that there's so much more awareness now. It's that catch-22 though, where there is awareness of it, but some people still think it, because there's so many people coming forward now saying, oh, well, I'm ASD or I'm ADHD. It's creating a bit of, now some people don't believe you when you say it because they think, oh, you're just jumping on the bandwagon because it's the new hip TikTok tag, you know. And yeah, I feel it's cyclic. Like, there's times in my life where where I've struggled. There's times like where I took agency over myself, like I did in Nashville and in England, where I was able to kind of just be who I wanted to be. But then coming home and then having children late, like I was 37 when I had my first baby and 40 when I had my second. No one talks about, because I'd never planned to have children. They were both happy accidents. But having always had my own little rituals and routines and my little, ways of doing things, suddenly they were all blown out of the water because suddenly I was awake. I was already a bad sleeper, but suddenly I was woken every 2 hours for breastfeeding, and then I couldn't eat when I was hungry, and I couldn't eat what I wanted to eat because my partner would eat something else. And then it became really stressful, and then hitting perimenopause. And no one talks about the women who have babies late, then hitting perimenopause and having toddlers while you're struggling with the hot flushes and the... Wow. So suddenly that's when the ADHD reared its ugly head, because I'd always known there was something else. When I looked into the Asperger's at the time, or the ASD, I always felt something was missing too. And I didn't know what it was because I didn't know women could have ADHD. In my age group, you'd always been led to believe it was just naughty little boys.
Naughty little boys.
But when my son was 3 and he was at kindy, and the kindy director pulled me aside and she said, "Oh, look, we think your son has some issues." And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" Because I'd never had a kid. I'd never hung out with people with kids. I'd somehow had friends that I sort of bypassed being around children a lot in my life. I was like the youngest and my siblings were a lot older than me, so I'd just never really been around kids. And he was just such a dream. He was so quiet. He never cried. Even when he was sick, we hardly knew. We had, because he just never complained. He would just sit and play with one toy, just a train, just that over and over again. But to me, I thought, oh, he's easy. But then once he started then trying to socialise with other kids, that's when it became obvious that he had no interest in other kids. He would parallel play, but he would just fixate on his trains. He was talking really early with lots of words. He was counting into the thousands when he was 3. They were like, our kids can't count to 20, and he can look at a number and go, that's 1,420. Like, he just...
But couldn't talk about emotions.
Couldn't talk about emotions. He wouldn't hug you. Like, if I tried to hug him, he'd turn his back on me and back up to me, so I'd have to wrap my arms around him from behind.
Yeah.
Or he would, if he wanted affection, he would sit next to me and lean on me or back up to me, but never just openly hug me, which he's learnt to do. He's doing that now, but at the time I didn't realise. But when they suggested I get him like just not a diagnosis, but it was more like go and have him assessed just to see if anything pops up.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it came back ASD too. And then the more he started to present with other symptoms, then came the ADHD. And I was like, I didn't know those things went together. I didn't, what's this ADHD thing? Because he wasn't the...
when in truth there's a very high premorbidity. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't presenting with the typical really hyperactive side. He's more the inattentive.
Yep.
But like he doesn't present... His presentation is interesting because I think the ASD and the ADHD sometimes battle each other, and I think when the ADHD is there when he's got energy, but then when he's tired, the ASD rears its ugly head, which is the same for me. Like I burn out, and that's when I get really fixated on things, and I can't stand noise around me, and I can't stand certain smells, and I can't eat certain things, and I fixate on the one food for 3 weeks straight. And he's the same. He'll only eat 3 or 4 things of a certain colour and texture, but he's constantly moving. We had to get him a wobble chair at the kitchen table because he just kept falling off his chair because he would rock on his chair. And we had to get him a sensory mat to dive on because he has all this energy and he just dives on it till he wears himself out.
Fidgets all through the house? Yeah,
but then he fixates on, like at the moment, he's fixated on this one computer game, and that's all we hear about from the moment he wakes up. He's like, "Mummy, I just got this thing on this game." And it's also his voice. He has nodes on his vocal folds since he was 5 because he talks in the one tone, one volume. "Mummy!" And everyone's always like, "Gee, he's got this husky voice," but it got to the point where he was losing it, and and we had to get him assessed for that by an ENT. So there's all these physical characteristics, but through him, he gets treatment. He's got an OT and a speech pathologist and a psychologist. So sitting in his sessions with his psychologist, suddenly I started to go, "Oh my Lord, the ADHD thing, I just didn't think that, oh my God, that would explain me constantly stimming. People call me Shaker, which was my dad's nickname, constantly moving, constantly chewing on things, changing subject all the time, talking over people, talking really fast, losing interest in things, and I was like, oh, that resonates with me more than what the Asperger's did.
Yeah.
Like, I know I've got my weird fixations and that, but I've always been able to get a job, and I've held down jobs almost to a fault. I think that part of me that fears judgment and rejection means I stick in relationships and jobs that way longer than I should. But the ADHD
because
gets
of not
bored.
liking change, and wanting to stick with routine, you're more likely to stick with unhealthy.
Yeah, they're kind of like two heads of the same Greek mythological beast. Like they're part of the same beast, which is neurodivergence, but they battle each other until one wins. And I think the ADHD, as I'm getting older and through perimenopause, as my estrogen drops, I hear your dopamine drops. So if you've already got a dopamine deficiency, then that's why a lot of women, I think now, are getting diagnosed in their 40s, because there's more awareness around that, because suddenly I've always had quite a long thread. Like Mum always said, you let people walk all over you. And I think that was that rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I was so afraid of people being mad at me or me expressing any emotion might make them get upset. So I just would let people get away with murder. I would never express my feelings on how things affected me.
It also takes incredible interpersonal skill to do conflict resolution and to be assertive and to manage that. And when you've got ASD, I think that's all easily just absolutely overwhelming.
It's too much. I couldn't stand... I find other people's emotion very uncomfortable. Yeah. So I think I adapted by... doing whatever I can to make sure people around me don't get emotional.
Wow. So then you don't have a voice.
I didn't have a voice, but now I do.
Wow. So what was it like? Yeah, I love it. What was it like to put together and have that understanding of your ADHD?
Well, I then sought counselling, and then she very quickly said, oh, well, because I'd been seeing that counsellor for a couple of years, and she was like, oh, that would make absolute sense. So then we did the testing, and it came back combination ADHD, which answered a lot of questions as well. And so that's been a couple of years now of just being... At first I've heard other people say this, when you get the diagnosis, it's relieving because suddenly you've got a name for it. You're not weird, you're not broken. You can understand yourself. Yeah. You can rationalise it. But then it's like you get angry. It's hard to explain, but then it was like...
Do you think it's a sense of loss?
Yes.
You know, I've got this on my plate to deal with as well. This is a hardship. This is not easy.
And it's a loss too for 13-year-old Susie that was struggling, that no one was able to set me aside and say, I see your struggle.
All those years you thought something was wrong with you.
Wrong with me. All the years that I really needed someone, like a teacher, to say, I see you're struggling. Instead I got, because it was in the 1990s, I got reprimanded. Well, I got put outside because I talked too much, or I couldn't sit still, or I couldn't...
Well, I have a lot of parents who have teenagers, and they, you know, we established they've got ADHD, and it might be that they're in their primary school age, and they say, shall we tell the child? Or ASD, shall we tell the child? And I'm always a case of, it's their business, not yours. It's their information, not yours. And if you don't share it with them, they're going to think there's something wrong with them when they're different, not
I share it. My son knows, but we don't talk about it like it's a deficit. I just say, oh, he's, you've got ADHD, so does Mummy. That just means we do things a bit differently, or that we need to make allowances for ourselves. So we talk about, like, when I'm cooking dinner, which to me is one of the most overwhelming experiences for me. Usually by the end of me cooking dinner, I'm an emotional wreck, because you've got the steam, you've got the noise from the fan above the stove, you've got the kids in the background watching TV. I have the sensory things of needing to wash my hands after I touch every vegetable, after I've touched meat. It's really gross for me.
Wow.
So they know. I tell them, Mummy's got to cook dinner now, so please can you go to your room and try not to make too much noise so that it can help Mummy get through this experience, because it's a lot. It's a lot for me. And then at the end, when I'm really, like, I literally rage eat, because by the time I'm at my meal, I'm so furious I want it over with, that they know not to talk at me or ask questions while we're eating. They eat theirs and they talk to Daddy, and that's their time for Daddy. I say, this is your time with Daddy. He's just gotten home from work. You talk with Daddy. You've had me all day. And then I eat, and then I throw my plate in the sink, and then I go have a shower by myself in the dark to come down from that. And I didn't realise how bad it was until having kids. Obviously, there's so much more stimulation when you've got kids around that you didn't have prior to that, because I always protected myself from that overwhelm. Can
I just say how extraordinary it is that you persevere and you do cook? You don't just do 2-minute noodles.
Not as often as I should. I beat myself up about the fact that, my son, we will probably all benefit from eating better, because, but I probably cook every second night. Because, and then, in between we'll have chicken sandwiches, or we'll have leftovers, or we will have takeout, because it really is, for me, from about 2 p.m. onwards in the afternoon, I start to get nervous about dinner.
Gee, that's
what's for
really
dinner tonight, tough. Because it's the whole process. There's so many steps involved. So my executive dysfunction.
Hey, you know what? There's a lot of nutrition in a chicken sandwich.
There is.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I use organic butter, so it makes me feel better. But no, it's a lot.
That's you being very brave every second night. I'm really admiring that.
It's a lot, and it's brave for my partner. Like, if he knows I'm cooking, he knows to stay the hell away from me, because but it's about me recognising that now, and I have a voice for that. I can say to him, this is my overwhelm, this is what causes me that. But it wasn't as bad until the last 2 years. I had to, the world economy, I was a stay-at-home mum for the first few years, but then I had to get a job. I had to, I had my music, which I made some money from gigging, but it wasn't consistent. It's feast or famine in the music industry, so you'll have periods where you're getting lots of gigs and then it dies off. And I had to get something consistent. So a job was suggested to me and I applied and I got it, and that's my job now as First Nations music officer at a music organisation, not for profit.
Which is called?
Q Music.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's sort of almost like, again, the ancestors designed this job for me.
Really?
Because I get to go out and do workshops with other musicians and teaching them the tricks of being a musician, like how to get paid, how to get your royalties, how to do this and that. So that's really fun. And then I also get to work with First Nations emerging artists to help mentor them with their careers. So again, it was like a dream job. But the one aspect of it that I struggle with is the admin side of it. Suddenly I've got this app called Teams, which is like an internal messenger service for all employees. And then we also have our work emails and then internal emails. And then I've also got my own private emails. Then I've got the kids' school email account that I get emails from every day. And then I've got Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger, Spotify for artists, YouTube for artists.
Wow.
There's like 40 platforms that my brain has to be aware of throughout the day. And then the overwhelm. Which is
huge for neurotypical, right? But when you've got ADHD and you've got, you need to jump onto all that attention, that detail, when you just have such high distractibility, concentration issues, it must be really, really hard.
So that's an aspect of it that has been really overwhelming. So, it's about trying to find that balance now. So I went down, I reduced my hours. I just said, look, after a year and a half, I went, okay, I have to go back to just 2 days a week for now to help me manage.
Yep.
And I'll just do the tasks that I'm good at. So it's about recognising what is within my wheelhouse, what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And sort of just being honest about that. I think people will appreciate that. But you still come up against it. Like in the workplace, there's some people who are just really good at admin that just roll their eyes at me, or they might tell me something once and then I have to ask again, what was that person's name? And they're like,
detail-orientated, methodical people.
And they huff at you because you don't remember a name. Or one time the CEO, like they'll be having, in the staff meetings, they'll be talking about stuff from like the top down. They're thinking about dollars and, the big stuff. Whereas I'm thinking from a musician's perspective from the bottom up, and they'll be talking about a big gig and then I'll simply ask something like, oh, well, where are those musicians going to store their equipment? And everyone just looks at me like they hadn't thought of that. But he once said, oh, Sue Ray, I love all your ideas. Even if it doesn't relate to what we're talking about, keep dropping them because one day one of them's going to stick.
Oh, lovely.
And that cut. Like I was like, wow. So you're basically saying that what I say doesn't...
You're bringing the practical front.
Yeah, and the irony is there's been so many things that I've been involved in since where so many people, artists have now come forward saying, oh my God, it's about time you did this.
You speak the language, absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess my point is for other neurodivergents out there is find your voice. Like I think once I started setting boundaries, that it's taken 45 years to learn how to set a boundary.
It's profoundly, isn't it? Because you've got to learn about yourself, then you've got to really accept that, and then you've got to learn to advocate for that. And there's a 3-stage process to that, and it takes a lot of life experience for that. But just with catching up, can I bring up a topic that comes up a lot? I get really annoyed when people try to pigeonhole people with ASD, especially. And they say that people with ASD are very, mathematical brains. And of course, some people with ASD do, but some don't.
I know.
And they imply that it's not a creative subset of the population. And of course, there's more difference when you look at ASD people. There's more difference between them than there is similarity. It's a massive umbrella term. And there's those that are incredibly creative, as like yourself, and then there's those who are incredibly methodical. 1 + 1 = 2 is their kind of more computer brain. So, do you ever get that? People having really false assumptions, and the creative side of ASD can be profound.
I think that's probably how we've been socialised. I know when I was first diagnosed with Asperger's, and she told me, Asperger's, and I didn't know what that was. And I said, well, what's that? And then so when I went home and told my friend, she's like, oh, you mean like Rain Man?
Right.
And so there was that public perception that, oh, well, if you're autistic, it's just that model of autism. And I'm like, well, I'm not like that, so I mustn't be Asperger's.
Yep.
So then for years I kind of really didn't really dive any deeper. I just went, nah, she was wrong. I only went back to her 2 more times and went, nah, she's completely wrong.
Yep.
It must be something else. But now, with hindsight and life experience, I can say yes. But it's like when I have a friend who is a support worker for people, and he predominantly works with older male men with Asperger's. but low functioning Asperger's. So when I said to him, oh yeah, I have Asperger's or ASD, he just went, no, you don't. I work with a bunch of men with that and you're nothing like them. And he actually got spicy with me and thought I was just making it up. And then I said to him, well, have you ever worked with any high functioning women with Asperger's? And his face kind of dropped because he realised, oh, hang on.
Yeah.
I might be wrong. So I obviously didn't hear from him for quite a while because I think I put him on the spot that day. And there is people that have that perception, oh, because you're not that, then you're not that.
No.
And it's why it's called a spectrum disorder, people. It's on a spectrum.
Yeah.
And like I have a friend who has the exact same diagnosis as me, and she is completely different to me. She cannot function in society. She is on a disability pension. She lives at home. She just does her quirky projects. She starts projects, finishes them, never finishes them, starts, never finishes. She rings me in hyperfocus, and then next week she's ringing me about a different topic, and the next week, and yet we have the exact same diagnosis. I can recognise when I'm being hyperfixated because I think at a young age that ADHD side of me was able to recognise a micro-expression, so then I was aware when people were losing interest in what I was saying.
And hyperfixation can be ASD and ADHD.
Yeah.
You've got the special interest of ASD, and then you've got hyperfixation.
I'm so fascinated by it. I think I will eventually end up, like yourself, a psychologist.
Yeah.
It's such a fixation for me, to the point where, like, I can often pick people out now that are trouble. Like, I've met colleagues of my partners at work functions, and I've gone to him, that dude, there's trouble, and he's like, no, he's great. 3 months later, oh God, you were right, that dude.
What do you mean trouble?
Just like that there's something not quite authentic about them. Like I can sniff out in genuine, I can sniff it out in people if they're inauthentic or if they're being ingenuous. And I think that the Asperger's is it's almost like logic to a fault. So when people, I find illogical behaviour really uncomfortable, and 90% of human behaviour is completely illogical. It's all subterfuge.
I don't know if you know Tony Atwood, who's the specialist on autism in the world. He happens to be from Brisbane.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's got autism himself. He's an absolute legend. If you ever get to hear a podcast with him in it, he's just phenomenal. And Tony Atwood's awesome. He says that people with ASD should take over the world because they make sense. And people who are neurotypical don't
make sense.
No, because ASD people are very methodical, logical, rational. They look for reasoning. And, you know, it's because of that they don't fit in the neurotypical world, because the neurotypical world is far more vague, intuitive, illogical.
Just illogical. And I think,
and we say things we don't mean. We do things we don't,
I can't tell you a lie, because to me, I mean, that's also probably that rejection sensitivity is for it. Being caught out would just be so repulsive physically to me that if I got caught out in a lie like I probably did as a kid once, I can still remember the one lie I got caught out on, and I've never forgotten the way it felt. So, I can't. I see people fibbing around me everywhere. Like I can see it in micro expressions.
So
it means that colleagues of mine will even say to me in like jobs or previous jobs would be like, they'd come to me specifically going, this situation's really freaking me out. And then I'm able to go, well, I think it's because that person ... and they're having this and that. And then they go, oh my God, I love your brain. Literally today I got a text from someone saying, I love your brain because that hadn't occurred to me. Now you've eased all of my worries.
So you came into the world and it was all an overwhelming confusion. Then you learnt how to interpret it and how to read all of these social cues and what the formula was. Then you got that down to a fine-tuned, nuanced skill beyond the scope of neurotypical, and now you can read bullshit.
And I think that people say Asperger's people or people with ASD, sorry, I keep using that term because that's what it was for me for the last 20 years, don't know how to read people, or they don't have social skills. And it's like...
But they do, they just came at it a different way.
Yeah, because it's logical, and a lot of human behaviours, especially in romance and things, or, flirtation has always been so... And that's gotten me into trouble too, because... if there's been a particular person that may have been interested in me, I didn't recognise that. They were just talking about something of interest to me, and then I would get into the conversation, and then they're thinking, oh, she's into me because she's talking about what I like, and it's like, no, I was just into what you like.
Let's talk about you and me, for example. I'm incredibly skilled with regard to reading the microfacial expressions and the interpersonal skill and people's agenda, and that is my superpower. I'm really, really good at that. You're good at that too.
Yeah.
I've come at it from an intuitive level, and you've come at it from a self-learnt level.
Yeah.
And that's the...
And sometimes I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, so am I.
Yeah.
But that's the celebration of the different approach. And so that's why I get really annoyed when people say ASD people can do this or can't do that. Can't do that. It's not true. It's just that they've come at it with a different skill set, and they've often had a really tough time finding their way. So therefore they get credit for it, whereas a neurotypical don't. That's my view.
And I think that's why I attract to I look now in my immediate circle of friends, I'd have to say most are on the spectrum. And that's not me making assumption, I know they've got diagnoses. I didn't know that when I first met them and we hit it off. I think it's because when you find someone who gets straight to the nitty-gritty, that doesn't make small talk, because I can't do small talk.
No.
I just can't. It's just so boring.
I can, but I don't.
I just avoid it now. I used to stand there going, but I'd be, thinking, how do I get out of this? But now I just don't put myself in those situations. If someone bores me, I'll go, okay, I'm done.
Can I just say that we better wrap up, but can I just say that there's been absolutely no small talk in this whatsoever?
Yeah, no. That's not my wheelhouse.
And I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed getting into this. It's just been absolutely wild. We've gone everywhere. So thank you so much. Thank you, Sue Ray.
Thank you.
If anyone wants to catch me online, we've got the website kirstenhunterauthor.com, a million resources on there. Jump online, Facebook and Instagram, Kirsten Hunter Author. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having these conversations.
Too much fun.
Thank you.